on Ekadasi, you have a special class about one of our acharyas.
Yeah, Vaishnava Acharya series.
Vaishnava acharyas, yeah. Okay, good. So I was inspired to speak about a great personality who's also an acharya, but doesn't appear in the recent lists. He's an ancient Bhakti exemplar from the Bhagavatam. And so continuing from the class in the temple yesterday afternoon, Bhagavat Shravanam, about devotee care given by Kuladeep Prabhu. I thought, and then tonight, Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj will be speaking on this topic as well. So I thought to continue with that theme by speaking of another great Vaishnava exemplar by the name of King Rantidev. I'll explain more, but initially I was introduced to King Rantidev by Radhanath Maharaj. He visited Poland, where we have he joined us for our festivals. In the 90s, I can't say exactly which year, but he stayed with us for some days. And as he was leaving, I was wanting to offer him some dakshina, to express my appreciation of his time and association, but I didn't have anything. I was a brahmachari, so I really had nothing to give. But that desire was there in my heart, it was very strong. And as he was leaving, someone came to me and gave me an envelope with a donation inside. And so I was overjoyed, and I rushed to Maharaj. And I said to him, I really wanted to give you something, make an offering to you. And I was feeling quite sad that I had nothing to give you than just words of appreciation. But then as I was feeling this way, someone came and gave me this donation. And so I'm very happy that I can make an offering to you. And Maharaj said to me, oh, your charity is like Rantidev. And so I had heard the name, obviously, but I didn't know who is Rantidev, this charitable personality. And so Maharaj's response invoked this curiosity in me that has remained 20-something years later. I'm still curious about King Rantidev. And I hope it's also provoked your curiosity as you hear that little anecdote. You want to know more. Who is this Rantidev that Maharaj referred to as an embodiment of charity and compassion, we will learn as well. So he's referenced several places in the Bhagavatam. The first is Canto 1, Chapter 12, where Yudhisthira Maharaj is celebrating the appearance of the hero of the Bhagavatam, and that is King Parikshit. Parikshit Maharaj is born as the heir to the Pandavas, to the Pandava throne. And when he's born, Yudhisthira Maharaj and his Pandava brothers, they're his grandfathers. Arjuna is his direct grandfather. The other Pandavas are his grand uncles, you can say. But in Vedic culture, cousins and brothers and sisters, they're all brothers and sisters, and uncles are like parents. So they see him as their son. And then, of course, his direct father was killed in the Kurukshetra war, Abhimanyu. And then, of course, his mother is Subhadra, Krishna's sister. So they celebrate his birth, Parikshit Maharaj's birth. And the Brahmanas are invited to speak about his future, because they are experts in Jyotish, as they choose his name as well. And one of the pronouncements they make is they say, and in charity, he will be like Rantidev. So there's one hint as to who this personality is. Krishna also references him in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, chapter 72, verse 21. Krishna gives a list of great charitable personalities who, he says, achieved the permanent by the impermanent. Taking something impermanent, something mundane, and then by offering that, they were able to achieve the permanent. And one of the people that he mentions is Rantidev. And then, just so you know that that his charity is not mundane, and this will become clearer as we spend time today, that he is indeed a Vaishnava and the Vaishnava Acharya. In the 2nd canto of the Bhagavatam, chapter 7, verses, well, it starts in verse 42, where Brahma is speaking to Narada Muni, and he says, you can only know the Lord if you're favored by him. It's not possible to count the glories of the Supreme Lord. And it's not possible by our own endeavors to know him. But if you are favored by him, then you can come to understand something of him. And then in verses 43 to 45, he gives a list of devotees who have come to know something of the Lord, something of his glory. And like we have the list of the Mahajans, the 10 Mahajans, 12 Mahajans. So this is a list, but it's much more extensive. It includes, Brahma says, myself, Lord Shiva, and then he says Swayambhuva Manu and his wife, Satarupa, and their children, like Priyavrata and Uttanapad, and then he mentions Dhruva Maharaj. So a much more extended list of really wonderful devotees. Some of them are even people who we might even sometimes give as negative examples of fall downs, like Sobari Muni, for example. He became distracted after 10,000 years of meditation. He became distracted by some fish who were copulating, and he decided he wanted to marry. He married 50 princesses. But then he's listed as well, because at the end of his story, usually we stop with his fall down and his marriage to 50 princesses, but you continue reading the story in the Bhagavatam, and it says that at some point he realized, hey, what am I doing? I'm distracted from the spiritual path. So he gets back to his spiritual practice, and he achieves the supreme destination, Padam, and those 50 princesses, they also follow him back to Vaikuntha. So he's listed there. But then another of the great devotees that are listed is King Rantidev. So great Vaishnava authority or Acharya, not listed in our lists of recent. Often when we say Acharya, we're talking about the associates of Lord Chaitanya or those who have come after Lord Chaitanya. But Rantidev certainly is Acharya, in the sense, Acharya means one who teaches by example. And there's much we can learn from him about Bhakti and about compassion from his example. So the place where we can really learn a lot of detail about this great devotee, Rantidev, is in the 9th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and chapter 21. His story is told in great detail. So that'll be our focus for our discussion today. What we've discussed thus far is just the introduction, where he's referenced in other places of the Bhagavatam. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll discuss Rantidev's story under 3 headings. So 9th canto, chapter 21, and our 3 headings will be: 1, his poverty; 2 will be his compassion, and 3 will be his compassion as bhakti. And after discussing Rantidev's story under these 3 headings, then I'll discuss bhakti, compassion as bhakti in some more detail. So let's begin with his poverty. So he's a descendant of, in the line of kings that came from the moon. So the Chandra Vamsa of the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. 9th canto of Bhagavatam is basically split in 2. The first half is about the line of kings that came from the sun god, in which Ramachandra appears. The second half is the line of kings that come from the Chandra, from the moon god, in which Krishna and the Pandavas appear. So Rantidev, he is in that line of kings of the Chandra Vamsa, and he's in fact a forefather to Krishna and the Pandavas as well. His glory was so great that he was famous both in human society as well as in demigod society as well. And what he was famous for was his compassion and charity. So not only was he famous throughout the earth, he was famous throughout the universe, and the demigods themselves would sing his glory. He had a policy of never endeavoring for his livelihood. He would accept whatever Krishna arranged for him. This is one way that sadhus, you read in the Bhagavatam, that sadhus choose to live. It is called Amrita. Amrita means nectar. You just accept whatever nectar comes to you. Madhavendra Puri, the grandfather spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya, he lived like that. When you read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that he sits by Govardhan Hill and he's chanting, and Krishna, he comes and gives him a pot of milk, because Rantidev, Madhavendra Puri will never ask anyone. He just accepts what Krishna actually sends for him by his own. So that's called Amrita. There are other ways of earning a livelihood. Another is called Mrita. That means you go and ask people, and sometimes people say no, and it can be like Mrita, like death. And then other means are, anyway, that's another class. Manu describes different ways that different varnas will earn their livelihood. So he's living by, he's a great king, but he doesn't have anything, because whatever he receives is just by Krishna's arrangement, and then we'll see he gives it away in charity. So at one point, the demigods, they had heard his glory in the heavens. Rantidev, he is the embodiment of compassion and charity. So they wanted to know his glory. They wanted to know the limit of his glory. And so they withheld the opulences of life, food, water. These are the basic necessities of life, and they were not available to Rantidev for an extended period of time. Adideva means that which is caused by the demigods. So we talk about different types of struggle. Adhyatma, ourselves, Adibhoti or Adibhotika, klesha, caused by others, and then Adideva, what is arranged by the demigods. So the demigods, they arranged for him not to have anything. For 40 days and 40 nights, Rantidev had nothing to eat, and he had nothing to drink. And his family also underwent considerable suffering. Up until now, even though he gave everything away and he depended on Krishna, he always had. But now there's a special arrangement that he has nothing. And so he and his family, they were shivering with cold and hunger. But Rantidev, his Bhagavatam says, he always remained sober. So we can pause here for some sadhana notes. One is that Rantidev is presented as someone who does not have any wealth here. Sometimes we might think, oh, I will be charitable later when I have myself. Right now, I'm not in a position to be compassionate or to help others because I myself am struggling. But once I'm strong myself and I'm well positioned, then I'm going to do so many great things for other people, and I'm going to be so helpful and so kind and so charitable. Rantidev here has nothing. And yet we'll see his character even under this greatest of hardships. So we're moving to our second section then. We'll get an example or examples of Rantidev's compassion and charity. Once, after being deprived of food and water for 48 days, Rantidev received some food made with milk and grains and ghee, very opulent food, and he received water as well. And so he was he took this food and he was there to serve his family. And he was about to take something for himself when there was a knock at the gate, a knock at the door. A guest had arrived. So the Shastra says, Atiti Devo Bhavan. Atiti Devo Bhavan. Yesterday, in the class, Vasudev was quoting the Taittiriya Upanishad. So in that same Taittiriya Upanishad, you will find this aphorism. Atiti Devo Bhavan, the unexpected guest is to be honored as God. You'll find also there, Matra Devo Bhavan, Pitra Devo Bhavan, honor mother and father like God. Acharya Devo Bhavan, honor the spiritual master like God. So Rantidev, he rose to receive his guest, this Brahmana. He received him well, and the Brahmana told him that I'm very hungry. Do you have some food that I can partake of? And so Rantidev, he served his guest, and the Brahmana guest ate to his full and went on his way. And thereafter, Rantidev was about to take of the food that remained when there was another knock at the gate. Another guest had arrived. And this guest was a worker, a Sudra Varna. And so Rantidev, he received that guest of his as well with the same honor, recognizing this person as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as a soul, part and parcel of Krishna. He gave him also a share of the food. And when that guest left, his second guest, and Rantidev was about to partake of what food remained, guess what happened? There was another knock at the gate. This time it was a man with his many dogs. And they said, the man, he said, "O king, I and my many dogs, we are very hungry. Please give us something to eat." And so with great respect, King Rantidev, he actually offered his obeisances to the dogs and their master. Seeing the Lord as present within all living beings, very exalted vision. He offered his obeisances to this man and his dogs, and he fed them what food remained. That was basically everything. He had already served 2 guests before him. He had served his family, he had served 2 guests. And so now this was the last food available. So it went to this man and his dogs. And as the man left with his dogs, what did Rantidev have left? He had some water. Remember, he's been fasting from food and water for 48 days. So he was about to drink his glass of water when there was a knock at the gate. Another atiti, another unexpected guest. This man was a Chandala. So a Chandala is somebody who's outside of Vedic culture, a social misfit, a social, what we might call a social delinquent. What Rantidev is being offered here are excuses why not to serve his guest. His first guest was a Brahmana, very exalted. Oh yes, certainly, of course. Namo Brahmanya Devaya. The Brahmanas are very pleasing to Krishna. And so, okay, he's going to serve him. The next guest was a Sudra. He might rationalize and justify, well, you know, I haven't eaten for so long. But he served him. And then the next was the man and his dogs. He might say, well, these people aren't, you know, the man and his dogs, I don't have an obligation to sacrifice for them. But he offered his obeisances. Now there's this Chandala outside of society. He might say, well, he's not really my subject. I don't have a responsibility here. And, but his response is most wonderful. When Rantidev heard this Chandala, he said, "O king, I am lowborn. Kindly give me some water to drink." That was his request. And all Rantidev had was water. So in a sense, he had the means to fulfill this request. Rantidev's words in this moment are most wonderful, and I ask you to pay attention. He offered a prayer to Krishna in this moment. He said, "I do not pray to you, Krishna, for the perfections of yoga, the 8 mystic perfections. I don't pray to you for liberation from birth and death. My prayer to you, O Lord, is that I will stay among all living beings and suffer their distresses on their behalf, that they may be free of suffering." That was his prayer. Let me suffer the struggles, the sufferings of all living beings, that they can be free. I'm happy to take their struggles on myself, that others will be happy. And so with those words, Rantidev, he, full of compassion, he gave the water to that Chandala without hesitation. And something wonderful happened. You can pay attention to this. After serving that man with the last drops of water, Rantidev felt satisfied. He's been fasting for 48 days, but now, not having eaten or drunk, but he feels satisfied. Why? Actually, this is quite a wonderful thing, and maybe some of you have experienced this. When you serve, maybe you cook for others, you don't feel hungry anymore. I've experienced serving prasadam to the devotees. It was a service that I very much enjoyed. Indrajumna Maharaj likes to serve devotees. He will often, after the Harinam on the Polish festival tour, when the devotees will line up for prasadam, Maharaj will be there by the pots and he'll serve everyone. And then I would often join him in that. And after serving the devotees, I'm sure many of you have experienced this, you don't feel hungry anymore. So yeah, William's nodding his head. somehow it's a mystical thing, serving others. We don't feel hungry. So he felt satisfied after serving these personalities. And so there's a nice sadhana note for us as well. That when we serve others, we actually feel great satisfaction ourselves. It is a great mystery. If you want to be happy, make others happy. Serve others. Be compassionate towards others. If you want to make others happy, also be compassionate and serve others. And so a great, wonderful phenomenon there. And another thing, another sadhana note for us here is that when we do serve others, let it be with respect. Rantidev offered his obeisances to that man and his dogs. It's not that he just threw something. Yeah, have this, go, be on your way. Sometimes we might be so-called compassionate towards another, but we give them something more to move them on because they're making us feel uncomfortable or maybe making us feel guilty. And so we give them something to send them on their way. But Rantidev's compassion and his service was full of respect. He's doing this without any expectation of praise or recognition. His name won't be on a plaque somewhere for having fed his food to the man and his dogs, or his water to the chandala. He's really doing this out of from the depth of his own heart. And he'll tell us more about this as we carry on. So the last theme then for this discussion on Rantidev and his compassion is that after he fed the water to the chandala, something wonderful happened. Yeah, and he felt satisfied. Something else wonderful happened. And that is the Brahmana, the Sudra, the dog keeper, and the chandala all returned. And they revealed something most wonderful to him. They revealed their true identities as Brahma and Shiva and Indra. So they were all demigods who had come to see for themselves the glory of Rantidev's compassion. They had heard his glory in the heavens, and then they had made an arrangement by which they could also test the limit of that glory and see for themselves the extent of it. And so Rantidev had passed their test, though he didn't realize he was being tested. And well, when materialists stand before powerful demigods, it's an opportunity to get boons, to achieve great opulence and power. And so these demigods were standing before Rantidev, ready to give him anything that he wished for. Rantidev simply bowed his head in respect, and he meditated on the lotus feet of Krishna, Vasudeva Krishna. Sukadeva Goswami, he said to Parikshit Maharaj, he said, because King Rantidev was a pure Vaishnava, always Krishna conscious and free from material desires, the Lord's illusory energy, Maya, could not exhibit herself before him. On the contrary, Maya entirely vanished like a dream. So Rantidev's compassion is not driven by an ambition to be recognized and rewarded by others, but rather by this vision. All these living beings are part and parcel of Krishna. And when I serve others, it's my service to Vishnu. He's doing this as service to Krishna. This is an expression of his bhakti. He loves Krishna, and his love for Krishna is extended to all living beings. Sukadev Goswami says, all those who followed the principles of King Rantidev were favored by his mercy and became pure devotees, attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and they all became the best of yogis. So, an important sadhana note for us is that compassion is service to Krishna. It needs to be based on this though. First, seeing all living beings as part and parcel of Krishna, and then respecting all living beings as part and parcel of Krishna. And when we do so with that attitude of bhakti, then that compassion and bhakti are non-different. It's different than compassion. Service to man is service to God. Prabhupada spoke against that. But service to Krishna, by recognizing his presence within the hearts of all living beings, that is bhakti. And we can learn more about this if we study Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, when Kapila Dev explains bhakti to his mother, Devahuti. He also explains it along these lines. In the 3rd canto, chapter 29, verse 22, he says, one who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples, but does not know that the Supreme Lord, the Paramatma, is situated in every living being's heart, must be in ignorance, and is compared to one who offers oblations to God. So I think we need to ask somebody to mute. There we are. Okay, so Kapila Devi is saying we need to, our service to Krishna should include a recognition of the presence of the Lord within the hearts of all living beings. So Kapila Devi continues, therefore, through charitable gifts and attention, as well as through friendly behavior, and by viewing all to be alike, one should worship Krishna, who abides in all creatures as their witness. Prahalda Maharaj, he also tells his friends. So Prahalda Maharaj is very famous for giving the list of bhakti angas, the list of bhakti practices, the 9 bhakti practices. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Parasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmani Vedanam. Hearing, chanting, remembering, glorifying, serving, praying. We know this list of 9 practices of bhakti. If you continue reading Prahalda Maharaj's teachings later to his school friends, when they ask him, how did you learn this stuff, Prahalada? Where do you get this from? So I heard it from my guru when I was still in the womb of my mother. And then he tells them, you are young, you should learn this from the very tender age of childhood. You should take up the practice of bhakti. And he tells them how. And he gives that same list again, but with some added elements. He says you take shelter of a guru. And then later he tells them that they must express their bhakti also as compassion for all living beings. In Canto 7, Chapter 7, verse 32, he says, He says, one should always remember that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his localized representation as Paramatma, is situated in the core of every living being's heart. Thus, one should offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position or manifestation. And then similarly, the Navayogendras, when they speak about bhakti to King Nimi in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, King Nimi says, tell me about the bhakta. Tell me about the characteristics of the bhakta. And he gives the Navayogendras give some gradations. They say the neophyte bhakta just sees God in the temple and they just see their guru. The more advanced bhakta, they have loving relationships with god brothers and god sisters, and they serve seniors, but they're also very compassionate towards those who are less fortunate, or they serve by those who are also junior or pious. And then he says, and then the most exalted Vaishnava is one who has love and respect for all living beings, recognizing the presence of the Lord in the hearts of all living beings. Finally, Krishna himself, he says, I consider in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, chapter 29, when he's instructing Uddhava, he says, I consider this process using one's mind, words, and bodily functions for realizing me within all living beings to be the best possible method for spiritual enlightenment. These are just fragments. So I've given you examples from Kapila Dev, Prahalda Maharaj, the Navayogendras, and Krishna, explaining bhakti as service to other living beings, recognizing Krishna's presence within the hearts of all living beings. And that is they're explaining bhakti, and then their culmination of their explanation actually leads to this revelation of compassion and service to all living beings, seeing Krishna as present there within the hearts of all living beings. And then Rantidev is the most amazing exemplification of that. So once again, some sadhana notes from Rantidev's story. One was that he was poor, but he was still compassionate. And so we can learn from this that we shouldn't be making excuses that we'll be kind and we'll serve others when we become very wealthy one day, sometime in the future. Another was that in serving, Rantidev himself felt satisfied. So he found a deeper satisfaction, not in things, but in service to Krishna. But serving Krishna by serving others, seeing Krishna present within the hearts of all living beings. And the other thing that we learned from him is that he's serving with an attitude of respect. And then finally, the third thing that we learned from Rantidev was that he was doing this without any desire for reward and recognition. His only desire was to please Krishna. He was wanting to please Krishna through this service. He was seeing this service that he was rendering as something that pleases Krishna. So I will conclude there, leaving a few minutes if there are any comments, questions, reflections. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Wonderful. Can you turn that on? You know how to do that? Turn it down. What's he saying? Yeah.
It's like we're hearing from the universal form speaking with
Yeah,
thousands of mouths.
Can you hear us okay now?
Yeah, we can basically.
That's Lord
Yeah,
Brahma speaking.
really
with four
wonderful
hands.
that's
point you're
Brahma,
making
okay.
about how it's not just charity. You can hear okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Can't hear you now.
The volume's not on.
Two thumbs up.
Okay, we got it.
Yeah.
Okay, not just charity, but Sanksadya Haritoshanam, that if it's done as an offering to Krishna, that
Yeah.
makes it appropriate.
That's
Just
right.
gave this marvelous class a while ago about the householder ashram. And okay, I'm not a brahmachari, I'm a householder. He said, but then in every ashram, there is appropriate sacrifice. One of the sacrifices of the householder ashram is to bring children into the world and to raise them in Krishna consciousness, to uplift society. Another two components of the duty, the sacrifice in the householder ashram, is to give charity and to receive a guest. Vaishya Shekhar Babu was just reading. I was shocked to hear this because I hadn't heard it before. He said, if a householder does not receive a guest in his house, then he's an animal. You know, and it's kind of awkward in a place like New York City where we have the locked door and we don't even have an extra chair at the table to receive a guest sometimes. And Radhanath Swami was saying, if the householder is only engaged in bodily maintenance, elaborate bank balance and accumulation of objects and comfortable life, then just lust and greed is increasing. So we have to counteract the drift, the natural drift in our ashram by giving charity, by receiving a guest and distributing prasadam, not just food, but prasadam. But anyway, you made these points, but it was just interesting to hear how important it is to receive a guest. And then Prabhupada says that if we become a little wealthy, then we lock the door. But a person who is living just with them, is within his means, when a guest comes, they say, come in, let me share, even if I have a straw mat and a glass of water and a few sweet words. Let me receive the guest as if it's a Supreme Lord coming. Anyway,
thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, reinforcing these messages. Thank you very much. Any other reflections, comments?
I have a question, Sripad Prabhu.
Please, yeah.
We study Bhakti philosophy, and then we understand we're not the body. We know that Krishna is in charge of everything. Krishna is in control. Krishna is providing for every living entity. And then we may kind of tend to get a little callous in our dealings with others. We may think Krishna will take care of them, so there's no need for me to be charitable. There's no need for me to be to do anything here. Krishna will take care of them. Krishna is working in their life. Everybody has their prescribed quota set aside for them. And this mundane charity is a detour. It's not necessary. I'm aiming for pure bhakti, and I'm going to bypass those activities that are aimed at the body. So how to not is that a valid? Is that a misunderstanding? How to counteract it?
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. So excellent question. And I think, those ideas that you have just expressed they might be common. And what we learn from the Navayogendras is that those are the ideas of the neophyte devotee, the Kanishta Adhikari will think in those lines. And we learn reading Bhagavatam that the more advanced devotee is just so moved by compassion. And they're not able to see Krishna as separate from devotional service, as separate from service to others as well, and seeing all living beings as part and parcel of Krishna. So those are, it's possible. See, what happens is in spiritual life at the neophyte level, and we go towards dry renunciation, and that can make that, and then we can feel superior as well with our renunciation and our detachment, and that can make the heart hardened, actually. But that's not our process. In bhakti makes the heart soft. So the marker of the advanced devotee is not the hard, detached, callous heart that you were describing, but it's rather the opposite. It's a soft heart of love and care and compassion. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for your wonderful elaboration on that. Thank you for great comments.
Thank you. I think we're at time, right?
Yeah, but we can go after, we can exceed. Bhima Prabhu, would you like to contribute? Waving by waving? Yeah, that counts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bhima Prabhu is the head of our animal sampradaya. He's given shelter to his animals.
Okay.
And he considers them better devotees than himself.
Right.
That's Bhima Prabhu's humility.
So like Rantidev.
No, it has nothing to do with humility. I'm trying to arrange to be a dog in the house of a Vaishnav.
Right.
Right. So I can live easy and still hear the holy name and not expected any service, no austerities, just lay around on the couch and eat prasad.
That's on that note. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if I'm to be born again, let it be as an animal or an insect in the home of a Vaishnava. Jai.
Jai.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Shri Ekadasi Titi Mahotsav ki Jai. Shri Radha Muridhara ki Jai. Shri Rantidev ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Samapeta Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. Nitai
Hare
Gaur Premanandi.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Great class, Srila Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Cameras on. Let the Lord see you. Okay. Thank you very much, dear devotees. Afterglow time. Would anyone like to share or reflect or ask a question? Shri Prahalda is still here. That's great. Thank you, Shri Prahalda Prabhu, for your time.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were coming back to discuss further. I was just
It's just a quick afterglow
right.
thing that we have here. Less formal. William? Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
We can't hear you, William.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We hear you.
Hare Krishna, Sri Prahalda.
Hare Krishna, William.
Thank you so much for this wonderful class. One reflection, I remember reading in the scriptures, I have it here, was when the disciples of Jesus, they were arguing among themselves, which is the greatest, which is the greatest? And then one of them asked, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40. He replied to them, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as you. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So I was just moved by, just remembered this scripture. It moves me so much. I'm so happy to be part of the Food for Life this distribution with Adi Purusha and the gang. Thank you again for this.
Yeah, thank you for that, William. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for sharing that reference and the linking of those two commandments together. That's wonderful.
Yeah, William Prabhu is managing the line at the park.
Yeah.
People line up to get prasadam. William manages that line very masterfully. He's our MC, Bhakti MC William. Okay. Sundaranandaji, would you like to contribute? Bhima Prabhu is still here. It's great.
Yeah,
Sundarananda.
yeah, sure. As we were listening, like Kamala Gopi and I were both commenting, like when we listen to Sri Prahlad Prabhu, it's so comforting and soothing to hear his voice. We'll say as soon as his voice came on, I'm like, who's that speaking? Because it's someone new whom we usually don't have. So it's very comforting. Also, his references to how we should try to dovetail everything we have in devotional life and all those recent examples. Also, I liked his response to your question, Anand Bihari Prabhu, whether we should be callous about donating and so on. So she answered that. So yeah, I think we get carried away in our own like little cocoons in our lives. But I think if we can try to take a little time to help our neighbor, to help the next person, to pass the word on, because I think that's all that's really expected of this moment. The Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I mean, we may not be qualified, but we can be the messenger, so that's my takeaway. All right. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Sundarananda. Beautiful takeaway. Yeah, bring a guest into your cocoon. That's great. That's my takeaway. My cocoon. I'm gonna have guests over my cocoon.
Yeah, I guess one thing to say is that Rantidev's example is so exalted, and we shouldn't imitate it. We can emulate it. So we learn from him, and then we apply according to our what is whatever is the stretch for us. But we shouldn't break ourselves trying to artificially imitate someone as exalted as Rantidev. We don't have an instruction that we should just live by whatever's given to us. That might be there for some. And then we don't have the instruction that whatever we have, we must give it away rather than keeping for our own needs or sustenance. So don't imitate, because that can break us, and then we can give up altogether and say that's not practicable. But whatever the stretch is for us, then we can emulate. We can emulate his example.
Thank you. Yes, Sundarananda Prabhu, see, you have to check with Amala Gopi and make sure you have her blessings before you give anything away.
Yep, for sure. Sure. Otherwise, we'll have other problems.
Okay. Oh, Bhima Prabhu is unmuted. Check it out. Hare Krishna.
Haribol, can I be heard with it's not breaking up or anything, right?
Yeah,
We can hear
you loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay. So I and another devotee way back about 30 some odd years ago were forced into a sort of pseudo Rantidev position, not 40 days and 40 nights, but 4 days. I'll try to like summarize this. We were out traveling. We were working down in Texas. This was during the 80s. We were working a big, huge playoff game. When I say working, devotees used to raise money by selling hats, professional licensed hats at the games. The only thing that we didn't do right was we never got permits because we'd always go from game to game. But anyways, we got swept up, him and I, on a Friday. It was an Ekadasi. We were fasting. In fact, we were fasting because we jumped out of the van with no breakfast, and we got swept up. Hey, stop it. We got swept up in, with all the ticket scalpers, and we ended up in jail on Friday in a 40 cot room dormitory. And when it came time for Friday, the evening meal, it was bologna sandwiches and milk and stuff. And we, like Aniruddha, who was my traveling partner at that time, complained to the jail keeper at that time. And the place was packed, by the way, 40 people. You wouldn't believe the characters that were in there. And we were in bunk beds. And he complained, we're vegetarians. Can we have vegetarian food? So the next meal we got on Saturday morning. So we hadn't eaten except for one pint of milk. So all Friday, and we were young brahmacharis. So we were very hungry. And then Saturday morning, because the magistrate wasn't showing up until Monday morning. And then on Saturday morning, we did end up getting a different meal. We got our milk with the rolled up bologna in the milk. So that's how they treat us. They said, "You're Hare Krishnas. This ain't, what do you say? This ain't a luxury hotel. You're going to eat what we give you." That's what they said to us. "We'll eat what we give you, Hare Krishna Moonies." So, so we went all Saturday with nothing to eat. And then on Sunday, we got up. I could tell you stories that happened during that time, but I'm just going to stick to the meal part of it. Sunday morning, we got up. We're dying. Our stomach is growling and everything like that. Aniruddha said, "Hey, listen, you ever hear of Mana Seva?" And I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "Like, you offer with your mind, you create the meal in your mind." So I was like, "Well, I'll try anything." So we sat together in on his bunk bed. Remember, this place was full of 40 people, 40, less than kosher people, and we're sitting there going through all these motions. I was cooking the chapatis. I forgot about them. I had a little burner in my mind, and I forgot about them. And when Aniruddha asked me, he said they're all burnt, so he had to cook them himself. So anyways, we cooked this large meal and we ate it. We actually fought over his chapati because there was only 3 of them. We only had time, and we fought over the last one. And then in the end, of course, we offered it. And then in the end, after we were done, and finally on Monday when we got out, we went back to our van, which was full of food, boga. And he looked at me and he said, "Prabhu," he goes, "I'm not hungry." And he goes, "Are you hungry?" I said, "No, man, I'm not hungry either." I go, "Were you hungry after we ate that imaginary feast?" And he goes, "I wasn't hungry. I didn't want to tell you because I just thought, I couldn't make anything of it. It's like I was no longer hungry." So that was a case where Mana Seva, and then we ate the imaginary meal, and while 40 guys were staring at us like we were crazy. And yeah, so that was one of those times, those little mystical experiences you have when you do things out of the ordinary in Krishna consciousness. Krishna reciprocates with a sense of humor and with a little encouragement to proceed with our body and our mind and our heart. Hare Krishna.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Bhima. I love that story.
Thank you. Bhima Prabhu always makes our afterglow time so funny and deep. Yeah.
That's a
Okay,
story
thank
that
you very
we'll all
much.
be sharing over the holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, dear devotees. Thank you, Shri Prahalda Prabhu, for guiding us today. You gave a class across the Srimad Bhagavatam, all 12 cantos. It's amazing. So many references. So cool. Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear devotees. It's Ekadasi, nothing in, nothing out. More for Krishna, less for yourself. More for your dogs, Bhima Prabhu, less for yourself. Come again tomorrow. Tomorrow is another day. Hare Krishna. Love you all.